Information fueled.
Opinion driven. This is Nashville's Morning News with Dan Mandis.
And so, my fellow Americans,
we talk news.
8:06, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Welcome on in. There's a lot going on. I want to get right to the Newsmaker Hotline where Congressman Any Ogles awaits. Congressman, always great to have you on. You know, I'm always fascinated, Congressman. I don't know if I've ever told you this privately. I know I've never said this on the air, but I'm always been fascinated with the behind the scenes sort of inner workings of Washington, D.C. And I've been there a couple of times now. But when there's an article like, and I don't know if you've seen it before, I've mentioned it a couple of times now, but Wall Street Journal comes out with this article on the president's cognitive decline. Washington, D.C. insiders reveal worrying new details with the 81-year-old president. Apparently, he is freezing in meetings. You can't understand him. He's a complete and utter mess. They've spoken to dozens of people on both sides of the aisle, and everyone is saying the same thing and confirming what the American people have been noticing all along. When a story like this drops from the Wall Street Journal, it's now been picked up by the Daily Mail, Fox News, and others. What's the vibe in Washington, D.C. amongst lawmakers?
Well, you know, I think from our perspective, it's we told you so. I mean, when you go back to his last State of the Union, so not this most recent one, but the last one, you know, he was all over the board. He was streaming statements together that didn't make cohesive thoughts. And then this last State of the Union, you know, I had a personal interaction with him. I spoke to him, and I'm not trying to be rude, but the lights were on, but nobody was home. And it was shocking to see it because he's the leader of the free world. And so I've got a bill called No Juicing Joe, which requires a public, they have to disclose anytime they juice him with drugs that would affect his cognitive ability. Because the American people, we as Congress have a right to know.
I'm reasonably certain, although I agree with it in principle, I'm reasonably certain that's not going to pass the Senate. But I think you would,
right.
I think you would also, of course, agree that in light of the upcoming debate on, I think it's June 27th, that President Biden should be drug tested, and Donald Trump has no issue with that.
Well, you know, I'm still a little skeptical. I know it's on the books that it'll even happen.
Yep.
But, you know, I was with President Trump in New York, and we had that very conversation of, you know, he's ready to go. He's ready to debate Joe Biden whenever, as often as he would like. But he was somewhat skeptical that it would even come to fruition. But we'll see. I mean, they put it out there. My guess is they find some reason, or they attach so many strings to it, that it'll be such a controlled environment, it won't be a true debate.
Well, it's been a minute since you and I have spoke. I had Senator Bill Haggerty on earlier, and we're talking about a number of different things. And so when you look at, you're talking about Biden, you know, perhaps pulling out of the debate coming up on the 27th. I mean, there's a couple of things he could do, right? He could say, you know what, they're asking for a drug test. I'm not going to lower myself to this absurdity. That's number one. Or they could say that, you know, Joe Biden doesn't want to step on stage with a convicted felon, which is obviously what George Soros and the Democrats and Joe Biden are trying to brand Donald Trump. What's your feeling about what we've seen in the last couple of weeks as far as the hush money trial?
Well, again, I was in New York. I saw Cohen testify. You know, I'm fairly certain if you were to compare the transcript to previous statements, he perjured himself, but that never will be fully vetted in that court system. So this was a weaponization of the justice system. It should scare you and every one of your listeners. You know, you have a voice, Dan. You are a voice of conservatism and freedom and logic. And so this same court system that targeted Donald Trump could come after you. Mm-hmm. It could come after me. I'm one of the most conservative members of Congress. And so this is a problem in our country. And we have to restore the idea and the notion and the basis that justice is blind. And it's applied evenly, regardless of your stature, your color, your creed, whatever. It's got to be blind. And when political retribution is now vetted through a court system where you're persecuted, that's a problem. And I don't think it bodes well for our country.
So the next question then is, I will admit, and I'm pretty sure you agree too, that things right now, despite and I'm air quoting here, the convicted felon brand on Donald Trump, I think it's fair to say that we may very well get the White House. We may very well flip the Senate, and we may keep the House. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But what are the plans for the Republican Party if we ultimately get all that control? Obviously, it depends on the makeup of each chamber, but you know where I'm going. Do the Republicans have any plans right now to do some of the things that we really wish that we could do?
Yeah, so I literally was in a meeting yesterday with Speaker Johnson and Majority Leader Steve Scalise. There was about, 15 of us in the room. And one of the things we were discussing is, what does the schedule look like for us going forward, going into the new Congress? That first 100 days, so this was one of the comments that Steve Scalise in particular was talking about what his vision is that first 100 days we're going to be in D.C. a lot because we're going to have a very heavy agenda. So a lot of the legislation, so you talked about, my No Juicing Joe won't go anywhere in the Senate. I put forward a lot of legislation. A lot of it is passed the House of Representatives, but it stalls in the Senate. And so what we're doing is we're putting forward good pieces of legislation like House Bill 1 and House Bill 2, one being our energy package, the other being our border security bill. And we're vetting out the legislation to get it to its point of passage so that when we have all three chambers or branches of government next Congress, we can hit the ground running because we've already had these tough conversations and we've already built coalitions and relationships with our Republican counterparts in the Senate. So that's the process. And so when we hit the ground in January, we will be on full speed.
H.R. 2. So you heard yesterday Joe Biden in announcing his executive order. He blasted the Republicans. He blasted the Republicans for not being able to legislatively get this done. As you and I have spoken about many times, H.R. 2 passed the House of Representatives, and Chuck Schumer refuses to bring it up in the Senate. It's got to be frustrating when the president clearly does this political move in this executive order yesterday, 5 months ahead of the election, trying to, in my opinion, pull a fast one on the American people.
Well, it's truly window dressing. And so there's a lot of caveats in this order. So on average or up to 6,000 come in a day. His executive order essentially closes the border when it gets above 2,500, but that does not include children. It also does not include anyone who is paroled in the country, which is around 1,500 a day at the border, and another 1,000 paroled at the airports, these are people that are claiming asylum.
And don't forget, if you use the app to try to get an appointment, you're also excused from that.
That's right. So you do simple math, 2,500 plus 15 plus 1,000, you're right at 5,000 people a day can still come in. So this is a nothing burger. But what it is, it's a campaign tool that he and Democrats can use to say, look, we're doing something on the border, when in reality, our country is being transformed by this open border policy. You and I have discussed this before. We have known terrorists operating in the United States of America on our soil because they came through the southern border. We've caught now the numbers up to 300 terrorists at our southern border. Some of those have had bomb-making material. Laken Riley was killed by an illegal. The two little girls, one in Virginia, Louisiana, were raped by illegals. You just had a family of 4 put in critical condition on the interstate because of illegals. And not to mention the fentanyl deaths. We have to shut this down. Our country is not a safe place anymore because of Joe Biden and the southern border. And I understand people want to come here, but they've got to do it the right way. They've got to do it legally. And quite frankly, we're going to have to start reversing the trend and deporting people. The election in Mexico, I think, complicates things. From all indicators, she's going to be on the more liberal side of this equation. I don't think she's going to be a good partner on immigration. So, Trump, who will be the next president, is going to have a tough task at hand when it comes to the illegal immigration issue. Congressman
Andy Ogles is joining us. Got to jump the traffic, but I'm going to ask you coming back. I know that you have some thoughts about streamlining VA services for our veterans, kind of off the beaten path as far as the news of the day goes, but I think it's a great thing. Going to ask you about that and a whole lot more straight ahead. 8:15, time to check the roads on WTN. Very much. As far as your weather today, a high of 84, light showers as well. Right now, 72 degrees at Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Appreciate you listening. Congressman Andy Ogles is joining us. Now, I know that you had some amendments. What you were looking to do is to streamline the VA services for the veterans because, as you know, and we've talked about this before a long time ago, but at times, some of these veterans live really far away from a local VA facility, and you're working to change that.
Yeah, so we have a bill. It's called MILCON. VA deals with military construction and veterans affairs or veteran benefits. And so I went to the House floor, had 5 amendments. They all dealt with distribution or delivery of services, healthcare services to our veterans to provide more home health, the ability for states to use funding to have nursing homes around population centers that are concentrated with veterans. So again, like you said, if you're in Murray County, the closest VA is an hour away. If you're down in Giles on the border, you could be driving an hour and a half. And if you happen to have a terminal illness or an illness that involves a lot of pain, you could find yourself having to be transported again for treatment an hour and a half away to go get a 30-minute treatment only to turn around and have to drive an hour and a half away. So we've got to fix that. You have people who committed their lives to their country to serve their country. They paid the ultimate price with wounds and injuries, some of them lifetime. And we can do better. We have the ability to do this for our veterans. This is common sense. And so that's what I put forward. They passed. So far, I expect they actually could be signed into law. So we'll see. I think the Senate's version of the MILCON bill will be a little different. So it'll go to conference, but hopefully most of my amendments will be picked up in the final agreement.
So Israel, just one more and real quick, but Israel is, of course, doing what they needed to defend themselves after that horrendous terror attack. They've gone into Rafah. It does seem like President Biden, on the one hand, he is still supportive, but on the other hand, it still remains very controversial in Washington, D.C. Do you see from the folks that you know and talk to in Washington, D.C., are you worried that as this battle, this final battle in Rafah is going to get even bloodier, how worried are you that the Biden administration will find that red line and say, okay, enough is enough?
Well, from virtually the very beginning, the Biden administration has been undermining Netanyahu and his efforts to, quite frankly, to enact justice. I mean, these terrorists came in, they tortured, they raped, they murdered, and they're criminals. And I've seen the footage, and what they did to people should never happen, quite frankly. No one should ever see that type of footage. But that being said, I fully support Netanyahu and his ability to go into Rafah and do what has to be done. And, we don't have confirmed reports, but I think there's fewer hostages alive than Hamas is letting the world know, and I think they've brutalized those women for quite a long time now, over a year, and so they've got to go in there. They've got to clean out Hamas, and quite frankly, eliminate Hamas, because for the last 20 years there's been a land for peace deal in place, but there has been no peace. Hamas and Hezbollah and all the other various groups have been attacking Israel nonstop for the last 20 years, and I've said it once and I'll say it again. If there was a radical faction of whomever across our border in Mexico lobbing bombs into Texas, we would occupy Mexico City within 24, 48 hours. And we may or may not give it back. Why? Because we're going to protect our homeland. We're going to protect our U.S. citizens. And you know what? Israel has the right to do the same thing. And so why would we prevent Israel's right to protect itself? And let's this is an important point for everybody to understand, is Israel is our eyes and ears on the ground in the Middle East. It's the toughest neighborhood in the world. We need Israel as a partner as we fight to combat terrorism. And quite frankly, we know we have terror cells operating in our country. A lot of the intelligence we get when it comes to terrorism comes through and from Israel. So they're a valuable partner, not only from a trade perspective and a democracy perspective, but from our own physical safety in this world of terrorism.
Yeah, both Merrick Garland and Christopher Wray have both said we are at great risk of a terror attack right now because of, as we spoke about earlier, Congressman Andy Ogles, the fact that we do have a wide open border, and we'll leave it there. Congressman, thank you very much for joining us. Have a great rest of week and weekend. 821 on Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Spring cleaning time in the Mandis house and maybe your house as well. It's time to call Zero Res, and they've got a great offer going on right now for you. 3 rooms of carpets cleaned for just $99 plus. They're going to give you a free dryer vent cleaning with air duct cleaning and $20 off of tile cleaning as well. Now, this is the company that comes to my rescue. They have many times. You know, the stuff that lives in your carpet, pet germs and odors, stuff that make you and your kids sick. Zero Res can get most of that junk out of your carpet, leaving you with soft, fluffy carpets that are going to dry twice as fast. Also, one of my favorite aspects of utilizing Zero Res, they don't use any harsh chemicals. That means pure safety for your family and your pets as well. Now, don't forget that great deal. 3 rooms of carpets cleaned for just $99. Plus, you're going to get a free dryer vent cleaning with air duct cleaning and $20 off of tile cleaning as well. Call them today. Tell them Dan told you to reach out. 615-535-9376. 615-535-9376. You can book online at ZeroResNashville.com. Zero Res. It is the right way to clean. 822 on Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7. Ken Weaver, what's coming up in the news?
Gunfire reported near the entrance of the U.S. Embassy in Beirut, and an update on the investigation into the death of a man after getting hit in the head by a Nashville bar security guard in February at 8:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.